Their replacements are a rock and roll band with an emphasis on the roll. And I think that actually sums up quite a lot.
What the fuck does that mean, Rob?
Think about it. Let it sink in. Let it sink in over the week. Hello and welcome to 1001 Album Complaints, the show where lifelong friends, musicians, and guys who show their love through gentle but pointed mockery tell the backstory on the most influential albums of all time, as chronicled in Robert Dimery's book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. Now, if you don't know today's album super well or not at all, no worries. We're going to guide you through it. We're going to play song clips while we dive into the backstory of this artist and this album. And along the way, we're going to be breaking these songs down musically and culturally to offer you both our praise and our nitpicky complaints as musicians. And at the end of all that, we are going to vote on whether this album is really a must-listen before you die. Now, if you're a regular listener, thank you and welcome back. And if you're not, if you're new to the show, let me give you our standard disclaimer. We are musicians here. We understand how difficult it is to make truly great art, and we come from a place of love and respect for the craft. But we also enjoy nitpicking and complaining, as the title of our show suggests. So I assure you we are not super fans, but honestly, even if we were, we would still enjoy laughing about the way our favorite music gets made. So the bottom line is we're not going to be treating this artist or this album with any particular reverence. Instead, we're going to be talking some loving smack the way all musicians do in the van ride to the next gig when the radio plays literally any song ever. My name's Rob. I'm a guitar player with decades of experience playing, writing, and recording music, and I'm here tonight to walk you through the story of a band that lead singer and songwriter Paul Westerberg once called a sloppy rock and roll band that tried to straddle the line between comedy and tragedy.
With focus on sloppy.
Yeah, yes.
Indeed. That, of course, is The Replacements. And tonight we're going to dive into their cheekily titled album, Let It Be, about which Robert Christgau, the old man yells at cloud of print journalism, once gushed. Bands like this don't have roots or principles either. They just have stuff they like. A+.
How did he get to A+ from that? That seemed like he was talking all kinds of shit.
Astounding. Yeah. Robert.
See, I disagree with them. They're rooted. They're very rooted, but he gave it an A+, so.
Yeah. I was going to say, don't talk too much shit on Christgau. He's still our biggest get for this show. We're trying to get him on before he dies.
I'm just always surprised when he gives such a stunningly positive review, frankly, because he's pretty sour on a lot of things. The question is, will our complainers and our very special guest, who you've already heard, fall in line behind Mr. Christgau? Find out on today's episode. But first, let's get ourselves situated here with a clip from the hit, I use the term loosely, and the opening track off this album. It's called I Will Dare. And with that out of the way, we're going to introduce our panel of complainers for the evening by way of a mean, snarky, tweet-length review. And I am going to send things first over to Tom.
Thank you, Rob. How bad must the originals be if these guys are the replacements? One can only hope that, like the Beatles, the Replacements also made Let It Be their last album.
Ooh, coming in hot. And we have a very special guest tonight. She's going to get a proper introduction very shortly. But first up, I want to hear a mean tweet from listener guest BT.
With all the frustrated angst, social and sexual confusion, and frighteningly casual alcoholism, this is the most Midwestern album of all time. Is that a good thing? Opinions will vary.
You had me at casual alcoholism.
Yeah. You had me at Midwest. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. We're going to get into BT's love of this album, or at least why it was selected as her specific pick shortly. But next, I want to go to Marty.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, BT and Tom. Good to be here today. Here's my tweet. Hey, guys, check out my new album, Dark Side of the Moon, where I fart into a microphone for 30 minutes straight.
It's good. It's highfalutin humor there. And I'm going to round it out. This is Rob here, and my tweet length review is: principled assholes barrel through a catalog of noise with occasional choruses. Like the much, much better band they are referencing, Yoko should have swooped in and broken them up.
Oh.
She was single in the early 80s, right?
Wow. Invoking Yoko.
Maybe after 1980.
Oh, damn.
Okay, we are going to get into our general impressions of the record and tell a well-researched backstory on the Replacements and the album Let It Be soon enough. But first, I just wanted to welcome to the show BT, the winner of our Stay Puffed contest. BT, introduce yourself to the listeners, please. I know you've sent emails over the years. We've read them. We've corresponded with you. But tell us a little about yourself and why you selected the Replacements' Let It Be, please.
I'm BT, and much like the Replacements, I live in Minneapolis. That's a far less bold statement like 2.5 months ago when I first heard that I thought this.
Hey, recently nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, right?
Hey, yeah. 20 plus times getting tear gassed in the past 2 months. I should get that Nobel Peace
Ooh,
Prize.
damn.
Yeah, I know.
Jesus.
God damn.
But yeah, I live in Minneapolis, and honestly, one of the reasons, along with the theater scene, that I came to Minneapolis was because of my love of first this album and then the whole world of music that it opened up. I mean, I first heard it when I was like 13, 14, so this would have been around 2009, 2010. And I mean, it's not a perfect album, but for me, it was a perfect album.
We're all dumb when we're teenagers. It's okay.
No!
So is this the first you heard of the Replacements then, BT? Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I picked it up from this UCD bin at the Borders in town. And so I grew up in this very, very, very small town in Wisconsin. And for context, my high school graduating class was 30 people. That was for 2 towns that had a combined high school. That is how small town Wisconsin it was.
Wow.
So I picked it up when we went about an hour and a half to the nearest larger city. And it was exactly what I needed at the time. You know, it was very angsty, very angry, very funny, at least to me at the time. I'm not sure if I think the humor holds up, but especially with Androgynous later, I'm going to get more into it. But let's just say I was not straight, and it was not a very nice place to not be straight in 2009.
Let's segue into, and I want to hear from the other folks and what their experience was, but I'll speak to mine first. I'm coming in relatively positive on the band. They certainly have things to complain about. They certainly are sloppy, but I think some of the songwriting is quite good. I didn't get into this as a teenager, and I was a teenager in the 90s, so I would have already missed the boat on the Replacements anyway when they were around. But I have listened to this before this week. I was probably in my mid-30s when I first listened to some Replacements material. I should say right off the bat that I know they have a very fervent fan base, so I'm sure we will get plenty of emails no matter what we say. But I think there's a lot to like here. I think some of the songwriting is good. I think they embody a certain amount of indie rock and roll bar band energy that I can't appreciate.
Yeah, I agree. I think what they bring to the table is authenticity and not giving a fuck, which I think are all like admirable qualities for a band. I don't know much about the personalities.
The story will certainly support that they do not give a fuck. Believe me. We have lots of evidence that they do not give a fuck.
Great. Good. Yeah, I know some of the Paul Westerberg stuff that he did later, which I like a little bit more because I think he's grown into kind of his like genius as a musician. And I think they do more than just punk. They can do a few more things, and I appreciate that about them as well.
Well, that's like actually where I'm coming from too. Is I like where they're heading. This is sort of their breakout album, but it's also a transitional album for them.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But it's the only album they have on the 1001 list. But for me personally, I think their follow-up, which is called Tim, is better in part because it feels a little more mature. Paul Westerberg as a songwriter feels like he's grown into himself. They're more comfortable with slow songs, with melodic tunes. That's just my personal opinion. So I kind of like where they're going a little more than where they've been. And on Let It Be, you get a little bit of both.
I will cop to the fact that I had never listened to a moment of the Replacements before this week. And I think that probably the maybe not even dirty little secret of this show is that I only seem cool compared to Adam because he's the other guy who's heard even less than me. But I had somehow never heard the Replacements before this week. And I kind of loved this album. I thought it came across, Marty, like you said, incredibly sincere. There is something in Paul Westerberg's delivery that just makes me want to like what he's saying. And I kept finding myself comparing it to how much I hate Lou Reed.
Hell's wrong with you?
And how objectively he has written amazing songs, but something in the way that he delivers it makes me want to hate him and makes me want to not like his songs.
Well, I'm sure he'd love you.
Yeah, I don't care.
Here's my fear, Tom, because I actually was more positive on the record before I researched the band. Because they have some things about them that made me like them a little less.
God damn it. I have it in my notes that you're going to tell me that they're like spousal abusing, like white nationalists or something like that.
No. They have their foibles, but they seem like okay guys overall. Or at least from what I was able to research. I just mean, I think there's some elements of what you might bristle at and what I might bristle at too, of an element of self-importance, which is disguised by don't give a fuck-itness. That said, I do think the music is very alive and still kind of jumps off the album. And I do think he's a great songwriter, and I think it comes through maybe on some songs more than others. Again, I like the less punky stuff a little better, which is sort of where they're going. But you also get it showcased on some of the songs on this record, which I really loved.
Yeah, I'd say that in terms of what really stuck out to me, I was not rubbed by a sense of self-seriousness. And frankly, it wouldn't even really bother me, the self-seriousness. Part of it, honestly, was the song Androgynous, that just the way that they approached the subject matter, I was just like, oh, these guys seem like pretty fucking with it dudes. And in my notes, I'm like, Lou Reed would be patting himself on the back about like, I wrote this song about these fucking freaks that I hang out with. Look how cool I am. And this was presented much more in a way of pointing more of a mirror at like how stupid it is that people even give a shit about this stuff, and that kind of attitude I felt like was charming.
It's progressive.
Well, and also like charming. It just came across as like, that's how they're not giving a fuck manifested itself. And I was like, I can dig that. That's kind of cool. And then stupid ass songs like Gary's Got a Boner. I was like, great. Give me a dumbass song like that. I don't mind that at all.
I love the song Androgynous as well. It's the first song I ever heard by the Replacements, but I listened to it as a cover as a teenager by one Crash Test Dummies.
Oh my God.
And I had no idea it was a Replacement song for 20 years.
At least the Crash Test Dummies cover is better than the friggin' Joan Jett cover. That one's terrible.
Which one? She was on 2 consecutive albums of hers.
Both of them. They're both cheesy in a way that song just isn't. Like, it can get so cheesy with the wrong instrumentation.
And you know what? That is a fantastic point. There are a couple of songs on here that I made a specific note of saying, like, presented in a different way, I would absolutely hate this. But I actually kind of really like the song. Like, one of them is the song Answering Machine. I'm like, I really like the presentation, and you put a full band behind this and it would just sound stupid. Like, I wouldn't give a shit about what you're saying.
I agree. They make some smart decisions, and they are as we're going to learn in the story, a bit of a paradox, right? Because on the one hand, they have this don't give a fuck about anything attitude. They self-sabotage like nobody's business. They tank shows all the time, seemingly for no reasons, isolating fans, yet people love them. But at the same time, you get this sense that behind the scenes, they actually took the music part quite seriously. They worked quite hard at it. Paul Westerberg worked quite hard at songwriting. And so that's the paradox of them. And I think in some ways they were trying to live out an ethos of rock and roll, which is something like this truism that I read mentioned when reading about them, that rock is at its best when it's teetering on the edge of disaster.
Like Van Halen or something?
Van Halen, yeah, there's an element of that in Van Halen, but I was thinking more like the loose, tight aesthetic of the band or the Rolling Stones.
Oh, I thought you were saying lifestyle.
I was thinking more like New York Dolls almost, where it's like it sounds like it could fall apart at any moment, but it doesn't, you know?
A little bit, yeah. I think that's a big part of what their deal is, and I wouldn't say that's the most important thing to me personally in a lot of the music I love, but I do like those bands we just mentioned. I think Dr. Dog, a more modern band that we like, embodies some of that loose, tight aesthetic as well.
Yeah, I don't think this band hits as hard without the unique voice of Paul Westerberg. He can sing and he can scream both effectively.
He's not necessarily the most technically competent, but like the really good Bob Dylan albums, John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats, he has a voice where he knows exactly where he wants to put the emphasis and what he wants to build up a little more oomph behind. So it's like that almost poetic, yeah.
Right, it's effective. And it actually reminds me a lot of like in moments like Kurt Cobain kind of does the same thing where like he can scream and he can also sing, and it's kind of like similar.
Yeah.
This band absolutely set a template for Nirvana. And we'll talk about more of those instances and you'll see more of what I mean. But part of it is certainly in the sound and the approach to singing. And I agree with one of the comments at the top that it just comes off as authentic, earnest. I believe what he's talking about, even when it feels a little like he's taking the piss. But more than that, I do also think he's a great writer. And I cited many examples of what I think are great lyrics, great little pieces of lyrics that he comes out with that just elevate what could be only a raucous bar band with some punk influences. It elevates it a bit beyond that. So I do see where the fans are coming from.
One other comment is the album cover. They're like sitting on a roof. That seems like something that probably happens a lot in Minneapolis.
Like, it's above 60 degrees. We got to get outside and take advantage of it for the few weeks that it's going to be nice.
There were 2 days earlier this month where it got above 40. It got above 40. And I was just like, that is walking casually to the bus stop rather than rushing out trying to catch it at the exact moment it comes so you aren't standing there.
That's roof sitting weather. I like also that it's not like a cool roof either. It's like clearly a suburban house landing roof, like outside of the bathroom window kind of thing.
Right. It's like we were in Milwaukee a few months ago, and it just looks like one of the like neighborhoods in Milwaukee. I haven't been to Minneapolis, so I have no means of comparison.
Rob, I have a question for you, and I hope that you can maybe clear this up for me. Did everybody else in the band hate Tommy Stinson, and that's why they mixed the bass to the point where you can barely hear it at any point on the album? Is that what's going on there?
Well, first of all, Tommy's older brother is in the band.
Yeah, I know. And they threw him out. So there had to be some kind of animosity there.
I was going to say maybe because he's the youngest, because he's 7 years younger than these guys. When they start the band, Tommy Stinson is 11 years old.
Yeah.
No way.
Yes, which is insane. But okay, but we're going to get into that. Maybe this is a good segue to start talking about the background of this album and this band. We have a fun story to tell here. But before we get into that, we're going to take a short break. And we're back. So we start our story with Paul Westerberg, the lead singer and songwriter, who was born in Minneapolis on New Year's Eve, 1959. Now, his mother supposedly worked very hard to induce labor several days early so that she could use him as a tax write-off for the year.
Classic parenting.
That's a thinking woman.
This is very working class, Midwest kind of stuff, yeah. Paul's dad worked for General Motors. His mom played some piano around the house. So there's some music going on. The family's also Catholic, so they feel guilty all the time, but they also like to drink. Foreshadowing.
He's the most relatable man on earth. I say as an ex-Catholic who also likes to drink.
Yeah, none of us here know what you're talking about at all.
So in 1974, Paul Westerberg had gotten a guitar. He'd learned all of 3 chords, as one does, G, C, and D. And one day, right around then, he's watching TV, and a band called the Raspberries comes on, and they're playing a song, and he realizes it's the same 3 chords that he knows. G, C, and D, the holy trinity of beginner guitar chords. Point is, Paul is hooked. The lesson is rock and roll is not hard. Do not overthink it. And he follows through with that. Now, musically, I should say, though, he's taken in a lot of different kinds of music, but especially the pop of the late 60s and early 70s. I read, for instance, that a friend's dad ran a local bowling alley with a jukebox, and that when they would periodically switch over the 45s in that jukebox, he'd give all the old ones to these kids, which they played constantly. So let's switch over to his neighbor, who he doesn't know quite yet, lead guitarist Bob Stinson. He's the same age as Paul Westerberg. He's from the same place. And musically, for him, things really kicked into a higher gear when he gifted his younger brother Tommy a bass to try to steer him in a better direction than Bob perceived he had gone down as a kid. So Bob Stinson had a rough childhood.
Can we just throw this out here that this blew my fucking mind? They're trying to, he's like, I got to keep him off the streets at 11 years old. I have an 11-year-old who, like, on the streets of the very safe neighborhood that I live in would be absolutely bewildered and have no idea what to do. What the hell was his 11-year-old doing?
Not to mention that imagine your son now joining a band today with high school seniors. Or actually, sorry, high school dropouts.
Okay, high school dropouts, much better, yes. That would work out really well. And even as a guy who's always wanted his kids to play music, I would have to put the kibosh on that. Like, there's no fucking way you're doing that.
Because, I mean, that's the rough path, right? You're not keeping him away from anything at that point.
Yeah, that is what parents fear. Yeah.
So Bob had a rough childhood. He had a dad who dipped out early. He had an abusive stepdad, really bad stuff. This is the father of his younger brother, Tommy, and he ends up acting out a whole bunch. He ends up in juvenile detention. So he's hoping that Tommy, his 7 years younger brother, doesn't go the same direction. So he basically pulls him into rehearsing with him and a drummer friend called Chris Mars. Like we said, those two are 18 years old. The younger brother is 11, it's just insane. Yet more proof, though, that it does not take any talent or age to play the bass guitar successfully.
No, it does not.
So the 3 of them are playing as a trio. They play Aerosmith and Ted Nugent covers, and they even attempt Roundabout by Yes.
Oh, God.
Which is kind of tough for an 11-year-old bass player, I should say.
Kinda. I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah. They did it without the organ. I don't even know how you do that.
Nor a vocalist, by the way. And they call themselves Dog Breath. And actually, it's that rocked up, vocalless Yes cover that catches Paul Westerberg's ear one day as he's walking by in the neighborhood. He just hears them from the street, and he's intrigued, and he kind of hangs out outside and unseen, and he listens to them play, and he even comes back a few more times, never introducing himself, just listening. And by the way, Tom, do you remember when that guy knocked on the garage door on Fulton Street when we were practicing just to tell us that we sounded good? It was like our second practice ever as the Chop.
Yeah. We did not sound good. I don't know what he was talking about. We sounded terrible.
Nonetheless, that compliment sustained me for another year at least.
It's pretty wild, though, that like a semi-successful band or a completely successful band are just like kids that lived like on the same block. It's just
right.
How odd and lucky they were.
Well, the luck will continue.
That's not the story with like a band like Yes or like King Crimson. Like those are like killers that all get together. This is like people who their ability is less important than
hey, 11-year-old, we need you off the streets, so here's a bass. Be in our band.
Yes. Yeah.
Then one day, Paul gets invited to come jam by a drummer friend of his, and lo and behold, they walk into the same band practice that he's been secretly listening to.
Did he admit it to them that he had been doing that? Because that's fucking weird.
Apparently, I think he did. Yeah,
and they had to have been like their parents' house, right? They don't have like a rehearsal space, I imagine, at this.
For sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. If you know the name of the first album, then you definitely know that they were at their parents' house.
Yes, it's called "Sorry Ma, I Forgot to Take Out the Trash."
Oh, okay.
So we got our lineup for the band all in the same room, if not actually in a band yet. Let's just go over that lineup. Chris Mars is the drummer. Bob Stinson on lead guitar, younger brother Tommy Stinson on bass, and Paul Westerberg, vocals and guitar. I'm just going to say it again. 3 of these guys are 18, and then there's a kid who is 11. Completely insane.
His testicles haven't dropped yet. He still talks like a little flute, you know?
Unfathomable to allow your 11-year-old son to join this band. But okay. So Paul, he desperately wants to be the singer in this band. Perhaps he just wants to be in any band. It's not super clear. But his musical tastes automatically conflict with the other guys, and he's not afraid of conflict. Let me be clear. He seems like from what I read, he's more plugged in to what's new and happening. And at the moment, right, they're in high school now, he appreciates Americana songwriting, guys like Tom Petty, who are still pretty new at that point. And he also is already into the first wave of English punk music that's just been coming out from the UK and hasn't broken through to suburban America just yet. So his would-be bandmates all have long hair, and they've never actually heard punk music in any real way, but they have already decided it is lame. So this leads to a few jam sessions, having Paul come in with songs he's been writing, because he's already been writing songs just on his own, and the band just rejects them out of hand for being uncool.
They're like, they're all the same 3 goddamn chords.
Yeah, like, have you heard Roundabout? Have you heard Rick Wakeman's solo on Roundabout?
Speaking of which, Marty, they ask Paul to sing Roundabout, which is their hit at this point, and he flat out refuses to sing it.
That was a good call on his part. That's not an easy one to sing.
I don't think Paul Westerberg singing Roundabout would really work. I mean, he's great at a lot of things, but so they hire a different singer. And then they fire that guy after a little bit. And then they hire another guy. And I get the impression that Paul Westerberg is just hanging out with these guys, maybe even hanging around practice, becoming their friend, but they haven't agreed to put him in the band yet. So when they recruit that second singer, Paul pulls him aside after a couple practices and it's just like, look, man, no one likes you. The band does not like you. I think you're great, but they all think you suck. So that guy quits. And now Paul is ready to finally take the mic. They're like, fine, I guess. You wore us down.
Wow, that's Machiavellian shit. I like that.
Now, look, this band is kind of a mess, as we'll see. They're not known for doing things in an orderly fashion or a sensical fashion by any means. But Paul joining the band actually, and maybe surprisingly, completely changes the dynamic and makes it a lot more formal overnight. He's the one right away who's insisting they actually practice the songs until they sound good. He's the one keeping them on task about showing up on time for practice and actually doing the practicing. Paul Westerberg is the disciplined one of the group. So just remember that and realize how insanely chaotic the rest of these dudes truly are as we dive deeper into this story.
And it's funny if you look at pictures of them, there's someone in the band that's clearly 13. You know, it's like,
Right.
But already has a drinking problem, I imagine.
Sure.
Oh, obviously. And over time, Paul's musical taste, the English punk in particular, it starts worming its way into the band. They all start enjoying this stuff, right? They cycle through a couple names. They first called themselves the Impediments. Then they briefly land on the Substitutes. And finally, as soon as it's mentioned in the air, they realize that the Replacements is perfect. As in, the band you actually wanted to see did not show up, so you've got to deal with us. And I really think this is a case where the name is the ethos.
Yeah.
You're not getting what you paid for. You're not getting what you expected, and fuck you. By the way, just a note, because I assume some super fans will hear this, but online you'll hear a lot of fans calling this band the Mats, which doesn't really make sense with Replacements. It's one of those weird fan community jokes. It comes from a misunderstanding of the band's name as the Placemats, and then I think the band started using it derogatorily towards themselves, and then the fans just ran with it. It's kind of like the Primus sucks thing, which began as Les Claypool saying that, and now the fans say it lovingly.
It serves the same purpose. You know, I can see how the confusion.
I always love reading about how these pre-internet fan communities propagated shorthand like this, though. It is kind of fascinating. Okay, so now they're a band. They got a name, and they continue practicing for a little while, and they pull a few songs together, and now it's been a handful of months, and it's time for a gig. Now we're in Minneapolis, and it is 1980. They know about a guy who books shows at a local club called the Longhorn, and this dude, his name is Peter Jesperson. He's also a local radio DJ, and he runs the only cool record store in town, and he happens to run a small local indie label called Twin Tone Records. Seemingly, this is the guy in town to talk to about anything music related. So Paul drops off a demo tape of the band rehearsing to this guy, Peter Jesperson, and then runs away nervous before he even listens to it. But when Peter does listen to it, he hears one song and he immediately believes the band is amazing. And the end result is that the next day he calls Paul Westerberg, and instead of offering him a single gig at the bar, he asks him point blank, do you want to record a single or a full album? Now listen, the Replacements had literally not played a single show, and they have an indie label offering to sign and record them.
Do we just suck? Is that why no label has ever wanted to?
You think something like that would happen more likely in like Delaware, than Minnesota?
I think it was kind of a magical time, and we'll talk a little more about how this links into the indie movement, which was really just getting going. And I should have mentioned this at the top, but a key bibliographical source for me, as it has been on many episodes past, was Michael Azarad's Our Band Could Be Your Life, where he details American indie music through the 80s, a series of bands kind of leading up to the breakthrough of indie into the mainstream, which happens with Nirvana. The Replacements are one of the bands detailed in that book, as well as bands like Black Flag and the Minutemen, and I've referenced that book before, but it's a great book and a great reference point. Okay, so as it happens, Twin Tone, the label, doesn't have a ton of cash on hand. No surprise there. So to record the Replacements, they grab cheap recording time whenever they can over about the next 6 months, and they plug away at their first album, which, as we mentioned, ends up being called Sorry Ma Forgot to Take Out the Trash. Now, side note, an early title for this record that they didn't end up using was simply Power Trash. Yeah. Which instead ended up being a self-styled genre for the band. That's how they referred to their genre, which I think is pretty great and pretty accurate.
Yeah, really I love that. That's great.
So along the way, Bob Jesperson, of course, does help get them some gigs around town. He starts feeding them records he likes, stuff like the Beatles, Bowie, and Big Star, all the Bs. And this influence really starts to show itself later on in the music, because at that point, Power Trash is a pretty good description of what the band is. They're very punkish, at least in these early days, right? Somewhere over the course of these 6 months, though, they ask Bob to be their manager, and he agrees.
It's Peter. It's Peter, not Bob. Bob's the guitarist. Peter's the manager, twin tone guy, everything.
You are totally correct. That was just a typo on my part. Peter Jesperson, the guy from Twin Tone, ends up agreeing to be their manager and feeding them all these great records. And, as a band and with this guy Peter Jesperson's help, they end up kind of rediscovering early rock music. That's everything from the Beatles, the Stones, Chuck Berry, stuff that they had previously been very dismissive of as being their parents' generation of music. Peter Jesperson's kind of like this big brother type who's helping them realize that it's actually cool. And I read stories that they would play the Beatles' Revolver like in the basement using 2 guitar amps as the 2 speakers and just like punch up the gain to punkify it. Stuff like that.
So how many gigs are they playing with Prince at this time? Just like constantly?
Absolutely 0. But we are about to get to First Avenue, which is the famous Minneapolis club featured in Purple Rain very shortly.
Now, the only math Prince story I know is apparently one time Paul Westerberg walked into the bathroom at First Avenue, saw Prince at the urinal, was like, oh, hey, hi, Prince, hi, Prince. And Prince just looked at him and was like, hey. And then he's like, I just walked out. I didn't know if he recognized me or if he just thought that I recognized him. But I just walked away because I didn't want to bother him.
He was probably just like blown away by Prince's like amazing penis, I'm guessing. I don't know what it looked like. I'm just going to guess it was amazing.
I assume Prince's entourage went into the bathroom first and painted the urinal purple.
That's good.
So the Replacements are punk adjacent, like I said, but right away people notice that Paul's lyrics are a little more self-deprecating, a little more poetic than your average fast and loud punk band, and he's a fair bit more melodic as well. And this is where another important trend in the life of the Replacements starts, which is that other bands do not like them. This is in part because they hadn't quite landed on any genre, and they definitely weren't punk purists, but also because of their very quick label and subsequent press attention. Right? Despite the Replacements seeming to actively spurn any and all chances at success, they seem to keep falling ass backwards into success. And maybe this is hard to understand now, but these are different times when a band announcing their allegiance to a specific genre and a musical lineage was extremely important. There weren't a lot of people doing the variety thing.
That was a huge problem between them and Husker Du. Like Husker Du, St. Paul, Matt's Minneapolis, so there's already that animosity. And then Husker Du was far more disciplined socially than the Mats, so they were very, very upset because they had been trying to get onto Twin Tone for a while at that point. So they were, these guys, who are these guys? They haven't even done a gig. We've been gigging for ages.
Good point. Yes, we're going to get to Husker Du very shortly, but yes, they did kick off a rivalry and they were annoyed about that. But I wanted to also set the scene a little bit, which is that it was the very, very early days of what we call indie. It really was more like proto-indie in 1980. Every single band is focused on a major label contract. That was the only conceivable option or realistic option at the time, and that was only just starting to change, right? And the Replacements become these press darlings, and they seemed to be actively disdaining the idea of more success from those big labels. It was kind of like, if we want to sound like shit, we will sound like shit. That's a representative quote from Paul around this time. But weirdly, as I alluded to earlier or said, they worked quite hard behind the scenes. This whole band is a paradox in that way. And I do think they set up a template for a lot of bands to come. We pretend not to care, or maybe we actively sabotage ourselves because we feel like it. However, we take the music very seriously approach. Also, the idea that, hey, we're losers. Being in a band is not, in fact, inherently cool, and we write songs from that perspective. That was pretty fresh and new at the time. It's not anymore, but think about that for a moment, right? And how that presaged so much of what came, certainly in the next decade, the one that we all grew up in. And lastly, this wasn't exactly new, but I think it was a little bit fresh for the time, which was the attitude of, we are extremely skeptical about the music business. We want absolutely nothing to do with the business side of music. I think this was maybe a slightly more common thing to say if you were already an established band, like a Pink Floyd or somebody we've covered recently. But as a tiny band, in the same way that stand-up comedians' whole goal in the 90s was to get a network sitcom, and then that sort of shifted away into a more of a do-it-yourself approach. I think it's the same kind of thing going on here. They were just really early on the trend.
And we've talked before about like the defense mechanism that some groups have of like, well, I didn't want a fucking contract anyway. You know, like you're telling me that this actually was genuine, that they were actively eschewing major label interest.
Well, I'm sure some of it is fear. You decide for yourself. I'll give you more of the anecdotes as we go along, and we can make that decision. But I think it would be kind of insane or even disingenuous to say that none of it was, there's a fear of success going on, almost certainly. But they went out of their way to self-sabotage, and they still seem to find their way. And I do think that was related to their ethos of always wanting to, by any means possible, stay true to themselves, whatever they thought that meant, right? But that meant sometimes bucking the trend.
And it's your fans that are going to drive any success that you have anyway, right? And so I can understand why there's a certain amount of two-facedness with bands like this, or like other punk bands too, like The Clash.
Yeah, well, that said, this band was also known for just tanking sets, which is not something you necessarily want to do if you want to win fans over. But you'll have fans, again, very intense fans of this band. They have a very relatively small but very fervent fan base, and they'll say, look, the reason they're great is because you can see them 5 nights in a row, and they will be thrilling every single night for 5 different reasons.
It's a spectacle, and we've talked about countless bands on this show that have done the exact same thing.
Sure. So at this point, they have Twin Tone and Peter Jesperson managing them, giving them cast as needed, believing in them, and as BT said, guess who's jealous? Other bands, including crosstown St. Paul band Husker Du, as yet unsigned. Also appearing on the 1001 list, by the way. They're basically the same age as the Replacements, the older Replacements, I mean, but they've been gigging longer, and they think of themselves as both wiser and more deserving of the attention that the Replacements are getting. The two bands kick off a relatively friendly rivalry right away, and one story I read about was a gig in the middle of a roller rink, which was effectively an audition for a larger gig that the Replacements really wanted to get, opening for some big band at the famed First Avenue Club in Minneapolis, the one featured in Purple Rain.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a hockey rink. That would have been the upgrade from the roller rink.
It's one of these deals where they're like in the middle of the roller rink with skaters going around them.
Well, that's a dream. That's a dream gig there.
But it's one of the first of many times that they completely sabotaged themselves. Apparently it was their first out-of-town show ever because this roller rink was in Duluth. So during the set, Paul tries to bang the mic against his guitar to like make some noise and be cool. Instead, he bangs himself in the face so hard that he starts bleeding profusely. So as a response to that, he decides to destroy his guitar and end the show. And the skaters are just like confused. Like no one thinks they're good. No one. And Husker Du wins the gig instead.
Also, it's Duluth. You're not getting many punks in Duluth.
All right.
Even today.
Fair enough. Bob Mould of Husker Du sounds like he was consistently low-key annoyed with the Replacements, even though they also palled around together and kind of mentored the band as well. And I should mention the Husker Du are definitely a lot closer to being a hardcore punk band. They're fast, they're noisy, they're loud. They kind of fit a little more in with that scene right away, a scene that is notorious for having a bit of a purity test, let's say, and responded a little bit negatively to the Replacements and basically thinking of the Replacements as more of just a sped up bar band, not a real punk band. So, but the two bands do start playing shows together. Some of the hardcoreness rubs off on the Replacements a little bit. They get some good reaction to some of their faster, punkier songs, and they decide to lean into it on their next recording, an EP called Stink, as in the Replacements stink, which is kind of funny.
I dig them. They seem like assholes, but I definitely dig them. Like their overall mentality of just, you know what I'll say? They don't seem manufactured. Whereas some of the bands we mentioned before seem manufactured, like The Clash or something like that, seem a little bit more manufactured than these guys.
Speaking of manufacture, that EP Stink is made so cheaply that they literally don't print covers. They get plain white ones and apply a rubber stamp to them by hand. Now, this discursion only serves to make them realize that they are not, in fact, tough, and that hardcore punk is a costume. They tried it on. It didn't quite fit. Paul is too damn melodic of a songwriter. That said, as you're mentioning, Tom, they have a fuck everyone and everything approach to being in a band, which brings us to everyone's favorite segment, which only comes once every harvest moon. That's right. Is it punk?
There we go. I love it.
Okay, I want everyone to participate in this. So BT, get ready. Get your finger on the buzzer. I'm going to describe some things that the Replacements did at various parts of their career, and you're going to tell me if it was punk or not. Number one, switching instruments on a whim and then improvising the loosest blues imaginable with Paul shouting the word hootenanny over the top repeatedly as lyrics, in quotes, then immediately finishing the, again, completely unplanned take, then declaring that it would be side one, track one of their new album.
That is punk.
Yeah.
That is punk. Yes, that is definitely punk. These guys did not care what they delivered back to the record company. They were in prime position to succeed, and they very actively spat in the face of success. This improvisation became the song Hootenanny, which was also the title track on their next full-length release, by the way.
A full-length release, which if you look at the cover art, it looks like 1956.
Yeah, mid-century Jetsons font or something. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's fucking bizarre.
Second scenario I would like you all to weigh in on. The Replacements came very close to getting denied entry to their very first ever gig at the hallowed CBGB's Punk Club in New York because they didn't look punk enough to be in the band they said they were in.
Certainly punk.
Oh, that's definitely punk. It's super punk.
Yes, that's correct. It's the most punk thing ever to not look punk. Punk immediately turning into a uniform and a completely gate-kept society is the least punk thing about punk. Yes, I am talking to you, guy. By the way, guess how they did look in 1983? They had shoulder-length scruffy hair, thrift store flannel shirts, and ripped jeans.
Oh, hell yeah.
And if that sounds familiar, it's because that is basically the exact look of the next generation of cool band fashion, aka 90s grunge.
I thought you were going to say Wayne's World.
That too.
Also lesbians.
And also lesbians.
Okay, I have another scenario for you. Tanking a major label showcase by playing a purposely terrible version of an obviously terrible song, namely the Rolling Stones' Start Me Up, to open the set before shouting into the mic derisively to a room full of major record label executives here exclusively to see the replacements, "Do we have a record contract yet?" By the way, before you answer, they played objectively terribly through the remainder of the set, yet still managed to land a contract.
I mean, it's a little punked.
Not punk.
Yeah, that's definitely punk.
That is definitely punk.
Oh, fuck that. They knew what they were doing.
Actively mocking the music industry, professionals who took the time from their busy schedules in the hopes of exploiting you for profit, then still coming away with a record contract from Sire Records, subsidiary of Warner Brothers. Punk. Also, actively mocking the Rolling Stones' downfall into crap rock while also slyly acknowledging their contribution to the larger rock and roll legacy. Also punk. Okay, I have one more here. Setting up an inflatable kiddie pool filled with disgusting brown water directly in front of the stage and sitting in it fully clothed, chugging Jack Daniels, while the opener for your tour, Alex Chilton of Big Star, played his set.
Oh, not punk. You got to respect those who came before you.
Yeah, too much work.
Incorrect. It is punk.
No.
Punk is about disrespecting everyone, even your own heroes, in favor of your much more important path of high-profile self-destruction.
Wow, that's a clean sweep.
This, by the way, I got from a Spin interview about the band in 1989, where the writer was recalling driving 3 hours from Austin to the show in Houston shortly after the Replacements released Tim, the follow-up to Let It Be. And apparently the set that followed this was a series of started but not finished cover songs, including Paranoid and Can't Get Enough of Your Love. Then Paul shouting that they were done and that everyone should get their money back at the box office, then throwing some loose cash from his pocket into the crowd, which started people wrestling and scrambling, then breaking up a shoving match by punching a guy out before the cops came and broke everything
Which
up.
is also punk, I guess. Clear.
Yeah. And also, kind of an asshole move.
The Replacements are idiots. They are children, and they seem like all-around assholes, but they are most definitely punk. Okay, back to our story, guys. I heard a quote from somewhere that said, "The Replacements are a rock and roll band with an emphasis on the roll." And I think that actually sums up quite a lot.
What the fuck does that mean, Rob?
Think about it. Let it sink in. Let it sink in over the week.
Oh, you don't know? God.
Yeah.
You listen to music, you don't know what that means?
After Hootenanny, they start to tour the U.S. They start to gain a small following. Tommy drops out of high school in the 10th grade. They've all dropped out, so that's not weird for them.
The 10th grade.
They aren't huge by any means, but they have a little clout now, and Paul decides to go back to his roots and write some actual sincere songs for the next album. They'd grown tired of playing only loud and fast. They spend a little time in Athens, Georgia, talking to REM's Peter Buck about potentially producing the record with him. Ultimately, that does not happen, in part because they don't have enough material written yet, and Peter Buck does, however, end up playing the guitar solo on the lead single, which we played at the top of the episode. It's called I Will Dare. So in August of 1983, they head back to Minnesota to a place called Blackberry Way Studios to record Let It Be, tonight's album. And that brings us to everyone's favorite segment, By the Numbers.
Two segments in 5 minutes.
Hell yeah, Rob, you're crushing these segments, man. Just one right after another.
Back to back, breaking all the rules. I'm trying to be punk as fuck. First number I want to throw out to you is 12, as in number 12 on Spin's 25 greatest albums of all time. Let It Be ranked also 15 on Rolling Stone magazine's list of 100 greatest albums of the 80s. Pitchfork ranked it the 29th best album of the 80s, and it was 156 on Rolling Stone's most recent update of their 500 greatest albums of all time. This album has accolades.
Damn. No wonder I don't like it. All the cool kids like it.
Rolling Stone's every 3-month list of the 500 greatest albums of all time.
At least, unlike Robert Dimery, they update the list in a complete fashion, Marty. We got to give them some credit.
Okay.
Next number I want to throw out to you is 2. As in number 2 on Robert Christgau's own year-end list of 1984, right behind, you guessed it, Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, God. Jesus. Can you imagine those two meeting?
Yeah. You know what, man? I got to disagree with Chris Gow on this one.
All right. Next number I want to throw out to you is 11,000. That is the only sales figure I could find for this album, but it has to be more than that over the years. This figure seems to refer to the initial sales of the record, like within the first year or so. And this number was already significantly more than all their previous records combined. It also charted on the US Billboard album charts at number 33, but despite lots of critical acclaim and influence seemingly throughout the decades, and it was their personal bestseller to date by a long shot, it didn't really hit big time. The sales figures are relatively low for something, A, so retrospectively loved by fans, and especially something so critically acclaimed when it came out. That is surprising to me.
I mean, a big part of it was an indie label, and they just didn't have the distribution. You see this over and over again. Like the big one I can think of is Husker Du was actually on SST, which was the big indie label. They wound up being owed like $50,000 or some ridiculous figure like that because SST was having to reinvest all of the money that they got from those albums into putting out more albums instead of actually paying their artists. It was hard to get things into record stores. There was a reason why you were always looking at trying to get into the major labels, even if you were decidedly indie and didn't like to look like you care.
So did this become the kind of thing that was sought after by fans? Oh, I want to get a copy of Let It Be, but I can't find it. It's not in the stores.
I didn't hear stories like that, but BT certainly has a point that this was also by far and away the biggest success of a label like Twin Tone, which was a 4 or 5 person operation at max, and they were scrambling to try to make up the demand. So that is certainly a part of it, and as we're going to see, the Replacements are going to get signed to a major label for their next record.
I also imagine that at this time, this was the era of tapes. It was pretty fucking easy to make a copy of a tape and give it to your friends. So that probably ate into their sales a bit.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that you cannot discount the distribution is a piece of it, and the promotion and things that a big record label can help you with. And we're going to see what that can reap with the next album cycle shortly, which, spoiler alert, is more, but still not mainstream success. The other reason that we can't overlook is the Replacements consistently sabotage themselves. Every time, or oftentimes, they would not show up to gigs, cancel gigs at the last minute, destroy their instruments in the middle of the performance, stop songs, play sets of entirely covers for no reason other than to make themselves laugh, or end sets early because they were too drunk. They did a lot of that kind of stuff, and that certainly wasn't helping them. And you get the sense that when they start getting major label interest, we'll get to it momentarily in the story, is people saw them as possibly being the next big thing. We can talk about why. And I do think it's on them to some extent that it did not happen. But let me give you one last number to end our segment. It is 1, as in one fuck, on live television for their 1986 Saturday Night Live performance on the tour for their follow-up album, which we've already said is called Tim. The first song of the evening went pretty okay, but for the second song on live TV, they had been drinking heavily. In the interim, they were sloppy, and at the end of the take, Paul shouts at Bob, "Come on, fucker," which effectively banned them both from the show and from television, at least for a very long while.
Interesting.
Getting banned from SNL, very punk.
It's true.
Yeah, that is quite punk. And also at this time, Tommy Stinson's 19 years old, right? When they're playing SNL in 1986. That's fucking crazy. God damn.
It's wild.
How is that guy not dead? That's what I want to know.
And in fact, the older brother is the guy that's currently dead, but we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
So before we move on from this segment and get back to our story, I just want to say thank you to everyone listening. We love doing the show every week. We love that you continue to tune in. We love having our listeners come on the show and help us pick what's going to be researched and what story is going to be told. And if I know anything about you, dear audience, it's that you have opinions too, by golly. Well, here's the good news. There's a poll and a comment thread up right now on our completely free Patreon page about this episode and this album. I want you to chime in with your thoughts. I want you to vote with other listeners on whether or not this is a must listen before you die. Tell us what we got right. Tell us what we got wrong. Those threads are always amazing. We get in those threads as well. Hop on over. Continue the conversation. The post is up right now. Patreon.com/1001 album complaints. And again, thank you for listening. Now back to our story. So whether the Replacements realized it or not, They had tapped into an important and underserved slice of the market. They represented a version of indie music that mainstream boomer rock critics and potentially executives could get behind relatively easily because they were so obviously paying homage to classic rock and even pop music from yesteryear. So, and song topic wise, of course, it was primed to touch modern young people in the kind of morning in America disenfranchised Reagan era. The misfit loser yokel who makes songs acknowledging the lame nature of everything, their friends, their hometown, their limited experience, even their own opinions and feelings. It really spoke to young people, and the people in charge did see that. They saw that for them, right?
You know, Rob, the more you talk about this, the more I see the 100% direct line to the complete disaffectation of the 90s that we definitely lived through in our teenage years, where just everything's meh and it's all whatever and it's all dumb and stupid and like who gives a shit. These guys really were trailblazers. I feel like most of the 80s was like Coke confident, you know, and these guys were definitely bringing something different to the table.
Yeah, and they were also some of the earliest of this generation to sing about the confusion of being a professional musician, of being successful. That kind of vulnerability, like you just said, Tom, was lacking from a lot of the rock of the 70s and the polished new wave on the radio in the 80s. So it stood out and it attracted this underground following. And yeah, I mean, I do think it's important to continue to reiterate and focus on their inherent lack of coolness and their embrace of the same. Here's another example. At the time, even amongst small-scale rock bands, the process of picking a cover song to perform was serious business. It was carefully curated to maintain a certain image of hipness. And the Replacements, on the other hand, went out of their way to play songs that their contemporaries actively disdained. Like, for instance, a song off the first Kiss album called Black Diamond, which appears on Let It Be. Now let's talk about the album title itself. They considered titles like Stunk, but they landed on a redo of the Beatles' famous album to A, troll their manager, Peter Jesperson, a devout Beatles fan, and B, to announce to the world that the Beatles weren't sacred. They liked the Beatles. They were a great band, and that's all. And by the way, they were very close to calling the follow-up album Let It Bleed, but they eventually landed on Tim. I wouldn't say naming albums is a strong suit for them.
That'd funny.
I actually like the name Tim for an album kind of a lot. I think it's kind of great.
So surprise, surprise, the band is not really making any profit during this time. The sales they were getting were not enough to offset the expenses of their tour. And as I mentioned, those expenses including destroying their instruments regularly, canceling shows at the last minute, not getting paid, and of course, profligate alcohol and drug problems of their members. But also, and this speaks to one of the questions you asked earlier, this included them playing only small venues because they were a bit fearful of becoming what they thought of as big-headed, arrogant rock stars. So, for instance, even when they were getting a pretty big following in Minneapolis, they could have played the First Avenue Club and probably sold it out for a single night. But instead, they played the significantly smaller club 3 nights in a row. Stuff like that.
They don't want to let that shit go to their head, and then they start acting like total assholes, and then like, where does it go from there?
That's why Jonathan Richman plays 4 nights in a row at a Portland dive bar every year. You know, I think it's the same idea.
Yeah, I get it. You know, to a certain extent, I get it. And as BT mentioned earlier, Twin Tone could not keep up with their success. Right? It was a very tiny operation. This was by far their biggest success. Let It Be was. So the Replacements realized they need to make the leap to a big label. And for the next record, they get signed by Sire Records. Seymour Stein, the guy who signed the Ramones and Talking Heads, signed them. He was the guy at that label showcase that they tanked on purpose that we talked about in the Is It Punk segment, right? But he signed him nonetheless. And it's a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, so it's a huge label. And like I said before, the bigs were all aware of them. They saw the potential for them to be the next big thing rock band with the right marketing and distribution, but they were also very rightfully concerned about their extremely erratic behavior, to say the least.
Now, Rob, you mentioned drugs and alcohol. What drugs were they on? I mean, alcohol makes sense. They're from Minnesota. clearly they're drinking all the time, but like, what kind of drugs are we talking about?
I think alcohol was the primary drug during a lot of this, and then I think cocaine starts to filter in as they get a little more successful.
Damn, it's like you could not be a rock star in the 80s without cocaine just entering into your life somehow.
Well, you got to imagine that people are just handing you drugs. That changes the game, let's be honest.
I would have to imagine that. That has never happened to me, that people are just handing me drugs.
Right,
I have to imagine that.
Right, but that is, I'm just saying that's a little bit, be on our high horse all we want, but that's a little bit of a different scenario when someone's literally just handing it to you backstage and going, please share these drugs with me, sir. And you're like, okay.
Oh, no, I'm not on my high horse about this at all. Like, I have a very addictive personality. If I became a rock star, I would be dead in 4 years. Just a bloated corpse.
So their follow-up, Tim, was released as their major label debut. Their sales continue to tick up, and their following does grow. And like I said, they played SNL. But all the while, their internal problems grow as well. Tim also was not a major success, even though they had this major label machine behind them, probably because they weren't doing a great job touring and being consistent internally and things like that. They end up firing Bob Stinson for drug use, which is a real pot calling the kettle black situation, since everyone in the band, especially Paul Westerberg and Tommy Stinson, who apparently always looked up to Paul as a role model, were also pretty fucked up. Or you could read that as Bob must have been really far gone. It's kind of hard to say. Reports conflict. But in any case, he leaves the band. They also fire their manager, Peter Jesperson, the guy who got them started. They do end up making a few more records, including their best-selling effort ever, 1989's Pleased to Meet Me, which includes a song called Can't Hardly Wait, which became the title for a 90s teen movie and ends up selling 300,000 copies.
Well, hold on a second. Can't Hardly Wait, the super shitty teen movie, is based on a replacement song?
I don't think it's based on it, but they took the title.
Also, it's a very popular movie.
I don't know. I've never seen that movie. I just assume it's shitty.
I'm pretty sure they didn't base the script on the song. They just stole the title and probably added it to the soundtrack. In any case, that becomes their high water mark. That record sold 300,000 copies. There is one anecdote around this time where they became so paranoid that their tiny X-label Twin Tone was illegally licensing their material in Europe. It is unclear if that's true or not, but the label definitely did legally print their old albums to CD as CDs became a thing, and the replacements were staunchly against CD technology. So in a fit of rage, they talk their way into the studio, steal the master tapes from their old albums, and chuck them into the Mississippi River.
Nicely done.
Now, luckily, it turned out those were only backup master tapes, but they did do that.
The effort was there, and that is punk.
You're telling me they thought that there was like a reverse zombies thing going on, where like there was like a European band pretending that they were this Minnesota band?
I think they were concerned they just weren't getting royalties. Yeah. And by the time the 90s came around, they had not hit the mainstream. They still hadn't really made any money, so they broke up. Paul Westerberg had a decent solo career that continues to this day. Chris Mars, the drummer, joined a Midwest supergroup called Golden Smog for a while, which included Soul Asylum's Dave Pirner and Jeff Tweedy from Wilco, they were both in the band at some point. Tommy Stinson, the young man, has played with a bunch of touring bands. He probably has the best resume post Mats. Most notably, he replaced Duff McKagan in later 90s Guns N' Roses and ended up playing with Axl for 16 years, which again, back to Tom's comment, how is he still alive?
Yeah, that's also not punk at all. Becoming like the fourth bass player for Guns N' Roses, not fucking punk, man.
What do you mean? The second, he's replaced Duff.
Oh, I guess, yeah, he replaced Duff. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, he was the primary bassist on Chinese Democracy, and apparently it was a pleasant experience for him. He's the only one with good stories about that album.
Oh, I bet, like, coming in from the outside and just, like, as, like, probably a fan to just, like, be in the room with those guys.
I mean, compared to the chaos of the Mats, he probably was like, oh, this is really chill.
Yeah, gee, how fucked up do you have to be like, this Axl Rose seems like a really reasonable guy, actually.
This is a little side note, but I follow Axl Rose on like Twitter, and he's a very progressive voice.
Oh, you know what? I'm fucking shocked by that. Good for him.
He's no Kid Rock, you know.
Who is?
What does he look like with his shirt off? And lastly, Bob Stinson never really recovered from getting kicked out of the band. He ends up dying of an overdose in 1995 at the age of 35. Yet, the Replacements remain a cult favorite and a band that has seriously rabid fans who I'm sure will be yelling at us very shortly if they haven't already dashed off their missives to our inbox. This album, Let It Be, is their only entry on the 1001 list, and thus ends our story of the Mats. So shall we move on to talking about some songs, y'all?
Sure, but my only complaint, first of all, there's not a lot that listeners can get mad about us so far. We've been pretty generous. I think the big complaint I have now is that this is the album that's on the list.
I agree, Marty. That is my central complaint. I think Tim is a better album. Call me a basic bitch if you like, but I do think it's just better. But anyway, we can get into that. I'd love to hear BT's thoughts on that as well. But let's play first a clip from the song we played at the top, drop it into a different section of I Will Dare.
I mean, this is just really solid power pop. I know that's not the term that they'd probably like me to use, but it's what it is. It's one of those songs that like really could, like, a slightly less intense version could have come out in like 1963, early Beatles, to like a good band doing a slightly throwback thing yesterday. It's just a really good, solid song, and it's got some great lines as well. It's definitely indicative of their future direction.
Yeah, I got a lot of stray cats out of this. So, this was like my first experience hearing any Replacements, which, again, I know I'm powerfully uncool. It's okay. But I was like, I was not expecting this sound when it first came on. And it definitely kept me interested because there were a lot of different things popping. I was like, what's fucking mandolin coming in? What the hell is that? Like, I was not expecting that at all. It took me in different directions.
It's got that jaunty, bouncy rhythm that, songs like this make me say, I totally get it. This was the only single released. It has the really cool countrified guitar solo. I definitely wasn't expecting that. That's the Peter Buck from REM piece. But the whole bounce of it, it's very melodic. And yeah, you're right. Like mandolin, which I believe is being played by Paul Westerberg, is a really nice touch. I think it shows them maturing a little bit as a band. They're open to non-rock instrumentation.
It's got this rockabilly thing happening. I had read somewhere that Paul Westerberg's a fan of Nick Lowe, who has kind of a lot of similar style on some of his early stuff from the 70s, which I think also Johnny Marr was a big fan of, which is why this also kind of sounds like the Smiths a little bit, even though they're kind of contemporaneously operating at the same time.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't connected the Smiths, but I can hear a musical connection to the Smiths. It's just they have such different singers, right?
Yeah, there's something in the band sound. Yeah, take out the singer. And then the comment I made earlier about one side of the Kurt Cobain voice, and then there's another side of the Kurt Cobain voice that happens also on this album. This is like the more singy part, and then there's the screamy part, which I can't help but notice.
So I was surprised to hear that Cobain went out of his way, apparently, to say the Replacements weren't a big band of his and that he wasn't influenced by them.
Of course he said that.
And it's not on his 50 best list. I referenced it. Yeah, but I hear a ton of Nirvana in so much. The fashion, the songwriting, and of course the vocal delivery. And, now that you made that Smiths connection, I see a connection in the lyrical style between a guy like Morrissey too. The lyric I picked out from this song that I really liked of Paul Westerberg's was, "Fingernails and cigarettes make a lousy dinner." That is a great line.
That's a great line. Yeah. There's this like jangly 12 string that is kind of providing the bed for the rest of the band to play over. And I will look past the fact that I'm pretty sure that 12 string needed a little tuning. It sounds a little bit off there, but it's okay. But I think that gives it a little bit of a throwback to like the Byrds era type of songs. And so it really does kind of exist in multiple eras in terms of like what they're bringing to the table. And I did think that it was quite a cool song. And that's one of the things that just throughout this album, I was just like, this is just kind of cool music. Like, regardless of whether or not I end up voting that it's influential enough to be on the list or anything, like, I can't deny that it's cool.
Yeah, agreed. And I literally remember the first time I ever put the Replacements on after hearing their name a lot. It's been a while now, but I do recall thinking that exact thought. This is cool. There's sort of no denying its coolness.
And this has a perfect example of a good hook, which is the meet me any place, anytime. Like that, how that comes in is just like classic good fucking hook that gets you, or it gets me anyway.
Right. This is definitely the side of Paul Westerberg and the Replacements that I like the most, and that I think Paul gets better and better at as his career goes onward. As we're going to see in the focus list, I like some of the other stuff and the styles they hit, but this is certainly my favorite and the thing that pulled me into the band in the first place. And so it makes sense that they released it as a single. And in some ways, again, it is surprising they weren't a little bit bigger, but we talked about why, right? Self-sabotage and distribution and promotion, unfortunately. What are you going to do? Let's move on to the next song that we're going to talk about. It's called We're Coming Out.
One more chance to get it all wrong. One more time to do it all wrong. One more night to get it half right. One more warning, one more warning sound. We're coming out. We're coming out. We're coming out, 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 we're coming out.
I fucking love this song. This song is really, really cool to me in terms of it did that thing where it comes out and it rips, and there's this very chaotic solo. And then right at like a minute 6, they hit a change, and it sounds like they're all not quite sure that that's where the change is coming. And I'm like, oh, they just barely are holding it together. And then they sort of maybe 10 seconds later, like purposely fall apart. And then like the snaps come in and the song just like kind of rebuilds itself. I thought that was so fucking cool. It tricked me into thinking like, oh, you almost fucked up. And I was like, oh no, you meant to do that. And it's like this purposeful chaos in the song. This was a standout for me. This is one of the ones that I will definitely be listening to again.
I've always seen this as one of like more minor songs on the album. I'm surprised that it like struck you so much because it's more backward looking. It's very, very, very similar to Taking a Ride. Like in structure, it doesn't have that slowdown section, but Taking a Ride has essentially the same structure for the fast sections and very much the same ending, the like chaos at the end. So I always saw this as very like looking backwards, like Taking a Ride, Careless, both of those are off Sorry Ma, Goddamn Job on Stink, which I would actually say is a better song than this one. I do like it because one of the things that I do really love about this album, which a lot of people probably wouldn't love, is the fact that it's transitional. It has all the stuff that I like about their early career and all the stuff that I like about their later career. It has all the different influences from different parts of the band that I really like.
Well, again, yeah, I'm coming in so cold that like maybe what you're telling me is I need to listen to earlier Replacements, and I probably would like that more than later Replacements.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you my take. I agree in the sense that I like it. It does sound like a completely different band than I Will Dare. And I think that's the point. And I put this on the focus list because in my mind, this album does have these two modes. One is more where they're going, and one is more where they've been. And the where they've been is this. It's the punked up, off kilter, in danger of losing the beat at any moment. But definitely exciting, definitely energetic. And then there's this other kind of more traditional tuneful songwriting mode. I do personally prefer the tuneful songwriting, but I felt this was the best example of the former, and also taking that form of a punked up, super chaotic, Sonic Youth noise solo-y kind of song, but adding some depth to it with that breakdown section. I love those snaps. I think they're terrific.
I don't have a strong opinion about this song. I like it just fine. I think the snap that you're referring to, Rob, to me comes across as a little gimmicky, but it is what it is. I think it's a fine song, but don't feel strongly about it.
To me, it's the best of the part of them that I don't love the most. I'm not that interested in going backwards in the Replacements catalog. I mean, I have a little bit, and it doesn't appeal to me as much as the stuff that comes after this, but I wanted something that represented that side of them that I could also say something positive about.
I just like songs that I can tell that there was a lot of thought put into it, like that breakdown to rebuild of the song. Like that's not, I'm sure that wasn't the original form that it took. It probably took the original form of just a rocker from beginning to end. And then in the studio, they're probably like, all right, well, let's figure out a way to make this more interesting. And there's something very interesting to me when I can almost figure out what their process was in the studio and the recording of it, that it makes it feel more intimate's not the word, but it makes it feel more maybe relatable to me. Like I can feel like I was a part of that decision-making process there.
One other thing I liked is that there's one piano slide that just feels like it comes out of left field at 2:06. Like, I get it. Maybe the piano part was still going from the breakdown, but it got totally drowned out.
All the piano on this album, I think, is awesome. I'm not sure who's playing. Is it Paul that's playing the piano?
It's Paul Westerberg, yeah.
Yeah. But I think all the piano is just like, it's just perfect. It's just it lends so much. It lends so much to the album and takes nothing away. You know.
Okay, let's move on to the next song we're going to talk about. It's called
Where I'm going to friggin' cry. I sort of got into this when I was talking about how I found this album. I was like 13, 14. Very, very small town Wisconsin, deeply closeted, also just so automatically butch that I was still getting crap for being a lesbian, even though I was closeted. This song in particular, but also the entire album, just sort of came at the right time for me. It's one of those songs where it has such an interesting mix of just emotion. There's a deep pain of it, because it is sometimes painful to just not be quote unquote normal when the world is telling you like, hey, you're not. But there's also a real hopefulness to it. It's a very hopeful song to me. So this also comes with one of the songs that isn't on the focus list, 16 Blue. That's another song that has this incredible mix that is honestly, I think, one of Paul Westerberg's best attributes as a songwriter. He can really take this sort of like complicated stuff, and it comes through so much that you're like, oh, that's exactly what it is. That's what it feels like. So yeah, if this was the only song on the album, I'd still put it on the 1001 albums You Must Hear Before You Die, just 12 different versions of Androgynous. you can have the hardcore punk version of Androgynous, the country version, the EDM version. I'd be like, okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say I want to hear the disco version of it. Yeah, that'd be great. You know, I think that you strike on with his lyrics a thing that I do think makes them relatable, in that it is not buried under a lot of subterfuge. It's not like he's not that he's saying not turning clever phrases or anything like that, but he is often plainly stating what the subject matter is. It's not like, you don't have to parse out exactly what he's saying, and it does make it very relatable. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's a cross between that and being a little bit imagistic. Like the line that jumped out to me here is Cupid dolls and urine stalls. Like that's a hell of a contrasted lyrical pairing. I think he has a very poetic way with words and can also be plain spoken. And that's an interesting mix to me. But in case it's not obvious, this is a risk. It's very progressive for a band, I think, at this time in the world to make a song like this. And I also think it's progressive for them production-wise. So you get those two interesting pairings together, and it feels like extra vulnerable and extra risk-taking. And I think that, plus his earnestness in his delivery, It makes it very ahead of its time, and it really makes me like and respect it sort of instantly.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone's saying. It's a beautiful song. It is authentic. It's honest. If I were some label person and someone was like, here's a couple songs, and I heard this song, I'd sign them immediately. Yeah, it's just kind of it's like songbook, American songbook or world songbook worthy song, in my opinion. It's just well crafted, great lyrics, great topic, great melody, great song.
You know, BT, you had mentioned that you could listen to an album that's 12 versions of this. But I personally think that it works so well because of the presentation. One person and one instrument that you can tell that they're playing, even if he's not actually playing it while he's singing it, but it was presented in a way that there's an intimacy to the presentation, which then makes you sort of be like, okay, I want to pay attention a little. Like if it was a full band, it might sound a little bit more generic, but it sounds stark because of the way that it's presented, which then makes you pay attention to the message.
Oh yeah, no, like hyperbole aside, it's more singer-songwriter than he'll usually get at the like last 2 albums of Matt's material and then his solo career. So this is definitely him going out on a limb. Oh my God, is this the right time for me to tell the story behind the song?
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
So this is one of those classic stories that gets told a bajillion times, so I cannot say with certainty that all of the details are accurate, but it's definitely overall accurate. So when Peter Buck was in Minneapolis, maybe it was to lay down that guitar solo, maybe it was just on a tour stop, he and Paul Westerberg decided to go out for the night, and they were both into the New York Dolls, so they decided to go out, makeup, like half cross-dressing, just absolutely sloppy. They wind up in First Avenue. They're both very drunk. They wind up in the women's bathroom of First Avenue because they're drunk. And they bump into this chick who like looks at them like startled and then says, "Oh, I get it, you're androgynous." She was probably trying to say something to the effect of drag queen or trans, but she landed on androgynous. And Paul Westerberg said, "What's that mean?" And she said, "It means you look like a woman, but you're also a man." And so he goes, "Huh, androgynous, that's a good word." And then they leave First Avenue, go to White Castle, and almost get in a fight because they're cross-dressing.
At a White Castle? That doesn't sound like the White Castle I'm familiar with.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the vocabulary aspect of this, because since I also discovered this song when I was 13 via Crash Test Dummies' excellent first album, by the way, which I know front to back, I think that's also the first place I learned this word, and then shortly after applied it to people like David Bowie and stuff like that and the stuff I was reading. But it was, it's fairly high vocab. I imagine it must have landed that way in the 80s, too.
Yeah, I'm picturing Paul Westerberg drunk as shit in a bathroom stall trying to figure out how to spell androgynous as he's like writing on the back of his hand to be like, this is a good song idea. I got to figure out how to remember this one for later.
Absolutely. Okay. From that high height, let's move on to Gary's Got a Boner.
I was very confused by the fact that Ted Nugent gets a writing credit on this because it is supposedly Cat Scratch Fever. I don't hear that at all. I don't get that one bit in any way, shape, or form.
I'm not sure I understand that either, but I did list this as my low point. This, to me, is the throwaway of their past and the kind of immaturity that I just feel like I could get literally anywhere. So I find it completely unnecessary, this sort of blues hackiness. You know, that's just me. That said, I was a little pleasantly surprised by the guitar shredding that pops up in that first little interstitial solo, but that it absolutely fails to meet the bar it set for itself and everything else that happens with the guitar.
This is definitely them leading into their chaotic live show, bullshit covers, occasionally saying lyrics that are not anywhere near the actual lyrics to those covers. I'm sure that this originated with them trying to do Cat Scratch Fever and then just going off on a tangent and ending up on boners.
So that I can respect. I also feel like half the time he's saying Jerry and not Gary, right? Like is he just switching that up?
They're not known for dialing in the takes, Tom.
Could not tell. Definitely couldn't tell from the product they put out there.
I get it, but I think where I bristle a little bit is, and we heard about it in the story, right? I understand that they want to be a chaotic band who doesn't give a fuck and who does what they want, and I can respect that. But it also smacks a little bit of, I just was a little vulnerable and I showed a real emotion, and now I have to cover that up with this kind of silliness. To me, that just feels a little ridiculous and like someone on a journey towards something better.
It feels like filler to me. You know, you have a song like Androgynous, you have a song like I Will Dare, and it's just like, why would you want to muck up the waters with something like this?
Well, I think it might come down to the, like Rob said, the sort of defense mechanism thing of like, no, we're really not all that serious, because they're about to do two incredibly serious and good songs right after this. So maybe they were trying to just be like, yeah, just in case you think that we're like, emotional and a bunch of like fucking losers or something like that. Like, we actually don't care. We talk about boners all the time. Like,
and I guess it's fun. I mean, I guess it's kind of funny. I read places that it's funny, but a lot of stuff on the album's not that funny.
But this is where I think the real punk move would have been to lean into vulnerability in songwriting and kind of say F off to anyone who didn't go with them on that journey. Do you know what I mean? It just feels like a little bit of a half measure to me.
It's definitely a goof. I'm not defending it. It exists. They do a much better job in the earlier stuff of being more consistently funny and more consistently having a sort of sardonic tone that like runs through it, rather than just suddenly having this comedy number out of nowhere.
And a comedy number that got fucking Ted Nugent paid. That's actually the most offensive thing to me. It's like, Ted Nugent got a cut of this.
I mean, how much did he get? How much did he really get paid?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
All right, let's move on to the last song we're going to talk about. It's called Answering Machine. This is my high point. I think the song is great. I think it's a great example of Paul's songwriting talent. This is the one that I plan on learning on my guitar as soon as I get home to it.
I like this. It's like ode to floppy disks, you know. It's a good reminder of what used to be.
Right. I love that it's so dated, but also kind of timeless. Yeah, I think it's great.
This song has like I know, and I just know from reading on Wikipedia that he was a Big Star fan, but this has the Big Star Alex Chilton thing going on, which I like.
Absolutely.
You know, we talked about presentation on Androgynous, and I think this is another one that just knocks it out of the park presentation wise. Like, I could see the draw of doing this as a full band, but the fact that it's him and a guitar, I picture him sitting at home by himself. It's nighttime. He's in a depressingly shitty apartment. He's like playing this song sitting on the floor next to a mattress on the floor and like a shitty old TV because he actually just called an old lover who wouldn't return his phone calls or something like that. And if it was a full band, I definitely would not have gotten that from it. But it comes across almost as like sincerity porn or something like that. And I know I said earlier that I think my favorite song on the album was We're Coming Out. I still think that that's maybe my favorite song, but I think I would 100% agree that this is the best song on the album.
Yeah, no, like as far as perfect placement of a song in the context of the album, it's perfectly placed. It's a great closer because you just have absolute futility of trying to contact someone, trying to get that connection, and then just trailing off and going like, well, that's it, I guess.
Yeah, I might as well write a fucking song and drink a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I love the presentation of him on the guitar, and it's a great example. File this away with songs that rock without a band needed. You know what I mean? He keeps that guitar figure. That guitar figure is so effective, and that rhythm is so effective at propelling this song forward as if there was a drummer, that I think it really does a great job. But I have to say, I just have to give it up for the lyrical sentiment, the inherent, and I hope it's still relatable to people who have never seen this device called an answering machine. I think it is, because it's so insanely lonely to be pouring your feelings out to this machine. I think people can still understand that.
I do have to quibble, though, that the recording that they play in the background is not an answering machine. That is the, if you'd like to make a call, please hang up and call again, try again. That's not an answering machine. That's a pre-recorded message. Yes, it's the operator's pre-recorded message. Like, you know.
There was already a song called Operator, Tom.
If any of our young listeners want to learn about answering machines, there's a very great Seinfeld episode that you can look up.
My last note on this one is like, you know, harmonies are hard. They're not for everybody, but nice try. Like, I appreciate that you tried it. They're pretty bad. But, you know, they tried to get them in there. It's okay.
It's definitely an energy band, not a perfection band. I think they've established that pretty thoroughly. We haven't been nitpicking all those spots where they, you know, where things go a little awry, because it's definitely about the energy of the take. And I think this is a great example.
And Paul Westerberg's got a voice that allows you to forgive bad notes. You know, even as somebody who's relatively unforgiving with bad notes, his voice has got so much character in it that I'm like, I know what you were going for. It's okay. We don't need to worry about you doing that perfectly. It's fine.
Totally. And I just want to point out, I had mentioned I had listened to this record before, but I can't say I really knew it super well. So this was sort of the find for me of the week. I'm sure this song had crossed my ears in the past. I know it did, but I felt like I discovered it this week. So that was great. Okay, but is it enough? Is it enough to make this record essential for listening? Now is the time where we vote, and I am going to send things first to Marty.
Oh, thank you. So I didn't have many like kind of preconceived ideas about how I was going to vote, but going through the story and going through the songs, I think I'm a definite yes that this is essential. I mean, mainly because they have one album on the list, and there are bands that have worse albums than this that have multiple albums on the list. And so, easy yes for me.
Looking at you, Dexy's Midnight Runners. Just kidding. Never heard a note of them.
Oh, you definitely have.
Other than their hit single, I mean. I don't really know anything beyond that. But okay, let's send it to you, BT, who picked this album. I don't want to assume your vote, but why don't you go ahead and tell us about your vote?
Picked this album, almost cried over the song Androgynous. Yes, definitely yes. I already said if it was only the song Androgynous, I would still say yes, but like, for one of those bands who has an outsized influence compared to, you know, how quickly they fell apart, how limited their reach really was, if there's a type of band that ought to be on this list, that's definitely the type of band that you choose. If Tim was on there, I might be tempted. If Hootenanny was on there, I might choose that over this just for the laugh. But they're classic 80s indie band from very much the beginning of that movement that, you know, ended up exploding all over the place and very much affecting the trajectory of both rock and pop music during the 90s. So, yeah, no matter how much self-sabotage or slightly cringy songs you put in there, you can't say that they didn't earn it with how much influence they had.
Excellent. That's a yes on the scrolls for BT. Tom, you're up, buddy.
I actually had a kind of similar experience with this album that I had listening to Rum, Sodomy, and the Lash by the Pogues, which is pretty much immediately I said, this sounds cool. And by the time I got about 2/3 of the way through my first listen, and it was, again, a listen that was very fresh for me, I was like, well, this is a very easy yes. And I think part of it has to do with the quality of the songwriting. I think the quality of the songwriting is top notch. And part of it has to do with the presentation. And part of it has to do with how just kind of enjoyable it was to listen to. Like, I actually really just enjoyed listening to this album. And there's a lot of albums that I'm like, this is important, but I don't like it. And this is one of those albums that I was able to say, this is important and I do like it. And that is a rare treat to be able to say, like, often those albums are challenging, but I'm like, this is an important album and I do like it. And so, yeah, I knew that this was a pretty easy yes before I even got all the way through the album. And then, frankly, I heard Answering Machine and I was like, well, this is a fucking hell yes. So, yeah, this is a hell yes for me.
Excellent. No surprise here. I'm going to make it a clean sweep. I also think the album is very enjoyable, even though I did get to know their follow-up, Tim, first, and thus coming to this album, at least this week, to get into it more deeply. It took a little bit of time to like all the aspects of it. But I think in general, it's quite easy to like. It comes off as cool. It comes off as energetic. It comes off as authentic. As we've been saying, the songwriting level is quite high, especially, give it that deep listen. And the influence is just really obvious to me. I like reading and learning about the indie movement of the 80s, but I can't always see a direct line to the musical canon beyond. Some of those bands seem great, but they seem a little like weird dead ends in the best way possible. This, to me, obviously leads to so much other great rock music that came after it, and I don't think you would get a Nirvana, let alone many other bands, or maybe even a Weezer, the sort of nerd rock era, without a band like The Replacements, and those are only a few. So absolutely, it's an easy yes for me. Happy to vote them on, happy to keep listening to this band. Excellent. Well, clean sweep, Replacements. You did it, Mats. Good job. Paul Westerberg, congrats, buddy. Before we move along and look at our old mailbag and get our homework for next week, I just want to give a warm thank you to our very special guest, BT, for coming on the show, putting up with us, getting in there, adding context, adding that Midwestern, Minnesotan context to this story. Thank you so much, BT.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I really love listening to and talking about one of my favorite albums of all time with you guys.
And we didn't shit all over it. So, that's a plus. Yeah, you actually had good taste. That's a point in your favor, certainly.
You got lucky in a way. Yeah. You never know how these things are going to go, Is there anything you want to plug, BT, where listeners can find you or anything like that? Lay it on us.
Listeners probably already know that over the past 2 months, things have been kind of rough in Minnesota and in the Twin Cities area in particular. And an organization that I'd really like to bring attention to, even as Operation Metro Surge is winding down, there are a lot of people who are in a system that does not want to give them their rights to legal representation. So the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota is a nonprofit that's been providing free legal representation for immigrants and refugees since the 90s. And they've been doing a ton of work just all over the place. They've been doing a lot of just really essential work with how many people have been detained, how many people have been moved around to try to keep them from getting that legal representation. I just think that they're a really essential organization to support if you have the funds.
Excellent. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, and I just want to co-sign on that. I don't know about the organization just yet that you just described, BT, but everyone deserves due process. I dare say it's anti-American to not want that for everybody, and so happy to link that in the show notes, and if you can check that organization out and consider donating, that would be great.
Smash cut to Rob getting quickly removed from his room.
On this show, we generally try to steer away from politics because it's like a little bit of an escape. But I think I can speak for everyone at the show when I say, fuck all that stupid shit that's been going on. And we're all wholeheartedly against it, 1,000%, and support everything that BT is saying. And you should go and donate if you can to the Immigrant Law Center from Minnesota.
Yeah, totally. We all want to break from politics. But honestly, I don't even consider this a political issue. I consider it a human issue. So you're here enjoying music with us. You're listening to people express their feelings through art. You're a human being. Get with it. Okay, well, thank you again, BT. And I'm going to... Oh, BT, by the way, did you have a set of complaints for us from our old takes? Anything you wanted to tell us as a kind of a live listener mailbag segment?
I can say is you guys have a bias against anything more rockin' than the Moody Blues. And you like Andrew Lloyd Webber, which is a crime.
I see. And which songster from Broadway do you ascribe to instead of ALW?
Stephen Sondheim. It's a very basic answer, if you know.
Who's that dude? Yeah, I'll happily cop to not knowing much about musical theater. I don't know about these other guys, but I've listened to some Sondheim for the record, but none of this is my forte, so fair enough. Okay. Let's read from our mailbag. I got a good one here, all the way from Germany. Listener Julian writes, "Hello. After finding your podcast last year, I've listened to all episodes and all the bonus content, which, as a quick by the numbers, amounts to almost 5% of my time in that year."
Oh, God.
Jesus Christ. That's significantly more than Marty has listened to. Like, way more than Marty has listened to.
Or maybe I'm just extremely bad at math. I'm not recalculating that. But anyway, I feel able to make a quick tweet-length review about each of the hosts. So here we have some tweet-length reviews from Julian. Adam very much reminds me of my son when I'm showing him new music. He has the childlike wonder in his eyes, and his mind is blown by new sonic experiences. Mind you, my son is 3 years old, but I bet he could recommend Adam a few classics. Next up, we have Marty. It's nice of you to include a non-musician as at least an attempt for diversity. That was a drummer joke, by the way.
Oh, damn. That hurts.
Also, he can boast to be the most Portlandish hipster there is by listening to embarrassing country slop before it was cool.
Okay, that's how I know he's in the bonus episodes.
Next, we have Alan. Alan seems to be the most punk of the group. By the way, just a short side note, I don't understand how that came about. Now Alan is as the punkiest of the group. That just doesn't really fit, in my opinion. But
I think somebody saw his scorpion tattoo that he has on his arm, and they were like, yeah, there we go.
Good point.
Punk.
Alan seems to be the most punk of the group. But that's like saying mayonnaise on toast is the most spicy compared to plain white bread. Still, like a good bass player, he is self-deprecating in the background, only to groove with you all tremendously and occasionally have a great solo. Next, we have Phil. Phil seems to be the kind of guy that thinks an A minor 7 chord might be a CIA plant, or 3/4 time has been invented by Egyptian aliens. His long, rambling monologues and episodes as a host are the peyote trip in the desert we sometimes need to find the center of our collective minds. Next, we have Tom, the self-hating softy of the group, announcing loudly his distaste of everything and everyone while also admitting to crying to every third song and liking the cheesiest tunes. So he might be my spirit animal. Keep it up. You'll be a great grumpy grandpa one day.
I'm not going to live that long.
And finally, Rob, the puppet master and data tracker, always better informed about the background than the main host of a topic. In German, we might call you lovingly a Klugschleißer, which I looked it up. It translates to something like smartass. Well, yeah, he also gives a Bavarian pronunciation. There's too much German in this tweet, but he's calling me a basic bitch. Anyway, keep up the good work. Looking forward to every Monday. Thank you, Julian. Love when we get these missives from so far away, and I'm glad you've spent 5% of your life listening to us gab.
Should send him some money, Rob.
That's awesome. It's how we incept our ideas on the world. That one was so long and drawn out. That's going to be the only mailbag for today. We'll return with the mailbag next week. But I should say, if you have anything on your heart or in your mind, we would love to hear about it. Critiques of us, getting into our personal peccadillos, or anything we got right or anything we got wrong on today's episode, send it on over to 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com. And we have but one thing left here. It is for Tom to tell us what we shall be listening to next week.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you to everyone who wrote in and everyone who is listening all the way to the bitter end when we find out our homework assignment. I have the Albinator here. Yes, Marty, it has been in the corner.
It's in the corner.
Hanging out with 11-year-olds. I'm going to try to see if I can get it to come over here and spit out a new album for us.
That sounds so mean. That sounds so mean to poor Tommy. He kept getting kicked out of bars when he was going to be playing. You should be nicer to him.
I think he's had probably a pretty okay life. You don't have a lot of sympathy for it.
It's got that Chinese democracy money.
All right, without any further ado, drum roll, please. We will be listening to the album is Siamese Dream, and the band is Smashing Pumpkins.
I'm going to go out on a limb and wonder if Tom has ever heard this one.
I had a 6-foot-tall poster of the cover of this album in my bedroom growing up. I was a big fan of this one, and I think has the greatest rock drummer of the 90s on it, bar none.
I am excited about this. I was joking. I know Tom knows this record forwards, backwards, and sideways because from the moment I met him, there is not a band I'm more associated with a young Tom than Smashing Pumpkins.
As I have copped to, I was not very cool. I was certainly not listening to hip shit in my teenage years, but the whiny, angsty, I'm an asshole bitchiness of Billy Corgan really spoke to me.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, excited to dive into that. Next week, of course, I'm hoping Tom will be back for that one. I guess we'll have to see. You'll have to tune in.
I'm calling hosting duty on that one. Are you kidding me?
You'll have to tune in next week to see. No, we're using a cliffhanger, Tom. It's a technique.
Oh, okay. Yes. No.
Anyway, listen along to Siamese Dream by Smashing Pumpkins. Tune in next week to listen to us tell the backstory to that band and that album. And for everyone here at the show this week, thank you so much for listening. I have been Rob.
I have been Tom.
I've been BT.
And I've been Marty.
Boosh.